The 1960s TV Western that became a cultural phenomenon had a secret that almost destroyed it before it even started. A major star nearly quit after the first episode. The show's most iconic scenes were filmed in places nobody expected. Behind the glamorous ranch, there were bizarre on-set incidents, mysterious casting decisions, and one actor who refused to say his own character's name the way producers wanted him to. By the end of the story, you'll wonder how this show even made it to air, let alone became one of the most loved westerns in television history. You have to understand something about 1965. Television westerns were everywhere. Bonanza was crushing it in the ratings. The Virginian was breaking new ground. Gunsmoke had been on the air for over a decade. So when ABC decided to greenlight yet another ranch drama, nobody thought it would be anything special. The network executives didn't even believe in it at first. They gave the show a terrible time slot, Saturday nights, which were considered a graveyard for new series. Nobody watched Saturday night television. Families were out doing things. Kids were at movies. It was basically a dumping ground for shows that networks didn't think would survive. But here's where it gets weird. The creators had originally pitched the show as something completely different. It wasn't supposed to be about a family at all. It was supposed to be a gritty, dark western focused on violence and adult themes. Networks rejected it immediately. Too dark. Too serious. Not family-friendly enough for 1960s America. So they went back to the drawing board. They added Barbara Stanwyck, the legendary actress who was already in her late 50s and thought she was done with television. She was supposed to be semi-retired, doing maybe 1 or 2 projects a year. But someone convinced her to take the role of Victoria Barkley, the tough matriarch of this fictional ranch family. Stanwyck signed on, but only under one condition: she would only commit to a handful of episodes. Not a full season. She wasn't sure this weird family western would work. She thought it might be a quick paycheck and nothing more. The pilot episode was filmed, and something unexpected happened. Test audiences loved it. Not because it was groundbreaking. Not because it reinvented television. But because it felt different from everything else on the air. It had heart. It had real family dynamics. It had Barbara Stanwyck being absolutely magnetic on screen. But then came the moment that almost killed everything. Barbara Stanwyck watched the pilot episode and she panicked. She realized something that terrified her. The show was actually going to work. And if it worked, that meant she was locked into a multi-year commitment. That meant no more semi-retirement. That meant grueling 14-hour days on set, memorizing scripts, doing take after take in the California heat. She wanted out. This is the part of television history that doesn't get talked about enough. Stanwyck literally considered walking away from the show before it aired nationally. She had her lawyer draft letters. She was ready to invoke the clause that would let her leave the project. She told friends she'd made a mistake. What changed her mind? Her co-star, Peter Breck, sat down with her one day. He told her something that made her reconsider everything. He said this show could be different. He said the audience was hungry for something with real emotional weight, not just cowboys and gunfights. He convinced her to give it 1 full season. 1 full season. That's all she agreed to. 13 episodes and then she was done. The network knew this. ABC understood that their star could leave at any moment if the show didn't feel right. It created this bizarre pressure on set. Everyone knew they were working with a ticking clock. But here's the really weird part that nobody expected. Something happened as they filmed those early episodes. Stanwyck fell in love with the character. She fell in love with the role. She stopped seeing Victoria Barkley as just another job and started seeing her as a real person. A widow trying to hold her family together in a dangerous frontier world. The network executives were sweating. They'd already invested millions. They'd already sold advertising slots. If Stanwyck left after 13 episodes, the whole thing would collapse. So they did something desperate. They offered her more money. A lot more money. They rewrote her contract. They gave her creative control over certain storylines. And Stanwyck amazingly said yes. But the network didn't know what was coming next. While Barbara Stanwyck was reconsidering her entire life, the network was panicking about another problem. They had no idea who should play her youngest son, Heath Barkley. This was supposed to be a supporting role. A minor character. Just another handsome actor to fill out the family unit. Lee Majors was 26 years old and completely unknown. He'd done some bit parts on television. He'd appeared in a few forgettable shows. He was gorgeous, sure, but so were 1,000 other actors in Hollywood. Nobody thought he was going to become a star. The casting director almost didn't even call him in for an audition. Majors wasn't on the A list. He wasn't on the B list. He was barely on any list at all. His agent was practically begging for any role, any opportunity just to keep his career alive. But here's where it gets strange. One of the producers had seen Majors in a small television appearance and thought he had something special, an authenticity that other actors didn't have. So they called him in. Majors read for the part. And something clicked. The network executives wanted someone else. They had names. Big names. Established actors who'd already proven themselves. But this one producer fought for Majors. Art. In meetings, during script readings everywhere, this producer kept saying the same thing, "That's our Heath Barkley." Majors got the role, but the network made him sign a contract that basically said, "You're replaceable." If the show didn't work, if audiences didn't respond to him, he could be written out at any time. They could kill his character off and replace him with someone else. This was incredibly unusual for a main cast member. Majors knew this. He knew he was on borrowed time. So when he showed up to the first day of filming, he was terrified. This was his make-or-break moment. What happened next shocked everyone on set. Majors brought an intensity to every scene. He wasn't just reading lines, he was living them. He was asking the director questions about his character's motivation. He was staying late to practice scenes. He was treating this throwaway television role like it was the most important thing in the world. Barbara Stanwyck noticed. She pulled him aside one day and told him he had something special. She said she believed in him. That simple conversation changed everything about how Majors approached the role. There's a scene in the second episode where Heath Barkley confronts his mother about a family secret. It's a quiet moment. Just two actors in a room talking. But this scene became legendary on set for all the wrong reasons. The director called for the first take. Majors and Stanwyck ran through the scene. It was technically perfect. The dialogue was flawless. The emotions were there. But when the director yelled, "Cut," he was shaking his head. He said it wasn't real enough. Stanwyck looked confused. She'd been acting professionally for over 40 years. She knew how to deliver a scene. But the director explained what he wanted. He wanted them to actually argue. He wanted real tension. He wanted the kind of emotional authenticity that you can't fake on a television set. So they did it again. This time, Majors improvised some dialogue. He deviated from the script. He said things that weren't written. Stanwyck responded by going off script too. The scene became this raw, almost documentary-like exchange between a mother and son. The director called cut again. Still not satisfied. But here's the weird part. He didn't tell them what was wrong. He just said, "One more time. And this time, I want you to think about the worst fight you've ever had with a family member. I want you to channel that." By the third take, something extraordinary happened. Majors and Stanwyck weren't acting anymore. They were living the scene. The camera caught something that television rarely captures. Genuine human emotion. No polish. No perfection. Just raw, honest interaction between two people who loved each other but couldn't quite understand one another. When the director called cut the third time, there was silence on set. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crew members were wiping away tears. That scene became one of the most memorable moments of the entire series. Audiences responded to it intensely. Fan mail poured in. People wrote letters saying that scene reminded them of their own mothers, their own sons, their own families. The network executives saw the rushes and immediately understood something crucial. This show wasn't going to succeed because of action sequences or fancy cinematography. It was going to succeed because of moments like this, genuine, human, emotional moments. But the success was starting to create new problems behind the scenes. Here's something that might surprise you. The Big Valley wasn't actually filmed at one location. The show's opening credits show this beautiful, sprawling ranch with mountains in the distance. Viewers assumed it was one real place. But it wasn't. The exterior ranch scenes were filmed at the Iverson Ranch, a famous Hollywood filming location in the Santa Susana Mountains near Los Angeles. But the interior scenes, the inside of the Barkley Mansion, were filmed on a soundstage at ABC Studios in Burbank, miles away from the ranch. This created a bizarre logistical nightmare. Actors would film outdoor scenes at Iverson Ranch during the day, then drive back to Burbank in the evening to film indoor scenes on a soundstage. They'd be sweating in the California heat one moment, then sitting under studio lights the next. The continuity was a nightmare. Wardrobe changes had to be perfectly timed. Makeup had to be redone constantly. But there's something even weirder. The Iverson Ranch location was actually being used by multiple television shows at the same time. On the same day that The Big Valley was filming, you might have had The Outer Limits shooting nearby or The Twilight Zone, or a dozen other productions. Actors from different shows would sometimes cross paths. One famous incident involved a stunt performer from the Big Valley accidentally wandering into a different show's set and not realizing it until the director yelled at him. The ranch itself had a troubled history. It was built in the 1880s as an actual working property, but by the 1960s, it had become a Hollywood backlit. Dozens of films and television shows had been shot there. Some crew members claimed the location was haunted, that they'd seen apparitions of old cowboys or heard unexplained noises at night. Cast members started reporting strange occurrences. Lights would flicker during night shoots. Equipment would malfunction for no apparent reason. One actress said she felt like someone was watching her during a particular scene, but when she looked around, nobody was there. The production company eventually hired a local historian to investigate the ranch's past. What they discovered was disturbing. In the 1920s, a stuntman had died on the property during a dangerous horse fall. Nobody had ever properly memorialized him. Some of the crew became convinced that his spirit was somehow present on the set. Whether you believe in that or not, something about that location seemed to inspire the cast to bring extra intensity to their performances. But the location wasn't the only thing causing tension on set. By the third season of The Big Valley, something toxic was brewing behind the scenes. It wasn't a dramatic, public fight. It wasn't the kind of feud that made headlines. But it was real and it almost tore the cast apart. The conflict was between Lee Majors and one of the other male leads. This other actor felt like Majors was stealing his thunder. When the show first started, this actor was supposed to be the breakout star. He had more experience. He had better billing. He had everything going for him. But audiences had fallen in love with Lee Majors. Fan mail for Majors was arriving by the truckload. Magazine covers started featuring him. He was getting offered movie roles. Meanwhile, the other actor was being sidelined. His scenes were being cut. His character was fading into the background. The resentment festered. It started with cold shoulder treatment on set. Then it escalated to deliberate scene sabotage. The other actor would flub his lines during takes just to force reshoots, hoping that in the chaos he might get more screen time. He'd position himself in scenes to block Majors from the camera. He'd even time his movements to accidentally bump into Majors between takes. Barbara Stanwyck saw what was happening and she was furious. She pulled both actors aside and gave them a lecture that apparently lasted 45 minutes. One crew member who was there said Stanwyck didn't raise her voice once, but by the end, both men were visibly shaken. She told them that their personal egos were less important than the integrity of the show and the respect they owed to everyone working on it. The feud never completely disappeared, but it cooled significantly after that intervention. The two actors developed a professional distance. They weren't friends, but they could work together without sabotaging the production. What nobody knew at the time was that this conflict was actually affecting the creative direction of the show. The producers, trying to keep peace, started writing scenes that kept the two actors apart. They created storylines specifically designed to give each actor solo moments so they wouldn't have to share scenes. This led to some bizarre episode structures where characters who should have been interacting constantly were suddenly separated for entire episodes. Fans noticed the oddness, though most didn't understand why it was happening. But the weirdest production issue was still coming. During the filming of Season 2, there was a stunt sequence involving horses that was supposed to be routine. A character needed to be thrown from a horse during a chase scene. The stunt coordinator had done this hundreds of times. It was one of the most basic stunts in Western television. But something went catastrophically wrong. The stunt performer, a veteran named Chuck Roberson who'd done stunt work on countless films and shows, was supposed to fall off the horse at a specific mark. The horse was trained. The ground was prepared. The camera angles were set. Everything should have gone perfectly. Except the horse spooked at the last second. It reared up unexpectedly. Chuck fell differently than planned. He hit the ground wrong and his arm caught underneath him as he fell. The impact was severe. His arm was broken in 2 places. The sound was so loud that the entire crew heard it, even over the noise of the horses and the equipment. Production shut down immediately. An ambulance was called. Chuck was rushed to the hospital. For 3 days, nobody knew if he'd ever be able to work again. But here's where it gets really strange. While Chuck was recovering, the producers faced an impossible decision. They had already filmed half of that episode. They couldn't just abandon it. But they also couldn't reshoot the stunt with Chuck because he was going to be in recovery for months. So they did something that was considered unethical at the time. They used a different stunt performer and well, not digitally but through clever editing and camera angles, made it look like the same person. They spliced together footage from different angles, used body doubles and relied on quick cuts to create the illusion of continuity. The episode aired and viewers never knew what had happened. But the production team knew. And it changed how they approached stunt work forever. More importantly, it changed how the cast felt about their own safety. Suddenly, actors were asking more questions about stunt coordination. They were requesting safety briefings. They were becoming more cautious about doing their own stunts. Lee Majors, in particular, became obsessed with understanding every detail of how stunts were executed. He'd watch rehearsals. He'd ask the stunt coordinators to explain the physics of each fall, each jump, each collision. Some people thought he was being paranoid. But he was actually being smart. Because 5 years later, when Majors became the star of The $6 Million Man, all that knowledge about stunt work became incredibly valuable. But before that happened, there was something else about the show that nobody understood at the time. If you actually watch every episode of The Big Valley, in order, you start to notice something odd. There are subtle references that seem completely random. A character mentions a town that was never mentioned before and is never mentioned again. A piece of jewelry appears in one episode and disappears forever. A recurring horse has a different color in later seasons. Some of these were obviously just production mistakes. But others? Others seem intentional. There's a theory, and this is from actual television historians, not just internet conspiracy theorists, that the writers were leaving Easter eggs for careful viewers. Hidden messages woven into scripts. Inside jokes that only the crew would understand. One example, in Season 3, there's a scene where Victoria Barkley is reading a letter. The camera briefly shows the letter's contents. If you pause and read it, the text is actually a message from one of the writers to another crew member. It's a personal note that has nothing to do with the plot. It's just there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Another example, the show's opening theme music contains a subtle variation in Season 4. It's barely noticeable, just a slight change in one instrumental section that lasts maybe half a second. The composer later admitted he did this intentionally as a way of marking the passage of time in the show's narrative. But here's the really weird part. There were episodes that were filmed but never aired during the original run. Not because they were bad, some of them were actually quite good, but because they dealt with sensitive topics that ABC felt wouldn't be acceptable for 1960s television audiences. One episode dealt with interracial relationships. Another tackled mental illness in a surprisingly nuanced way. A third episode was basically a proto-environmental message about water rights and corporate greed in the Old West. These weren't preachy or heavy-handed. They were just honest stories that reflected real issues. These episodes were shelved. They were locked away in ABC's vaults for decades. Some of them didn't resurface until the 1990s, when television had become more progressive and networks started releasing lost episodes as special bonus content for home video releases. Fans who discovered these episodes were shocked. They realized the show had been trying to say something deeper all along. It wasn't just a Western about a ranching family. It was actually tackling social issues in subtle, intelligent ways. This discovery led to a complete reevaluation of what The Big Valley actually was. Scholars and critics started taking the show more seriously. It stopped being dismissed as just another piece of 1960s entertainment and started being recognized as something with actual cultural and artistic value. And that's when people started asking bigger questions about what really happened behind the scenes. Barbara Stanwyck continued acting for another decade after The Big Valley ended, but she was never quite the same. She'd given everything to that role. She'd poured her soul into Victoria Barkley. When the show ended in 1969, she felt like she'd said everything she needed to say as an actress. She retired from television and film, doing occasional theater work and making rare public appearances. She passed away in 1990 at the age of 82. But before she died, she gave an interview where she said something that shocked people. She said, "The Big Valley was the most meaningful work of her entire career. Not her famous film noir roles. Not her award-winning performances. The Big Valley." Lee Majors went on to become a superstar. The $6 Million Man made him one of the biggest names in television. But he never forgot what he learned on The Big Valley. He credited the show with teaching him how to be a real actor, not just a pretty face reading lines. He's still alive today, still acting, still grateful for that one producer who believed in him when nobody else did. The other male lead, the one involved in the feud, struggled to find work after The Big Valley. The industry is brutal, and once you're typecast or left behind, it's hard to recover. He eventually left acting and became a horse breeder, ironically finding peace in the very thing his character spent years writing on television. The Iverson Ranch, where so many scenes were filmed, was sold in the 1980s. Today it's mostly abandoned, slowly being reclaimed by nature. But film and television fans still visit it, trying to find the exact spots where their favorite scenes were shot. It's become an unofficial landmark for classic TV history. Most shockingly, in 2015, a documentary filmmaker discovered that several of the lost episodes we talked about earlier weren't actually lost at all. ABC had made multiple copies and stored them in different locations as a backup. One complete set was found in the personal collection of a retired network executive who'd kept them all these years. Those episodes were finally restored and released to the public. When people watched those hidden episodes for the first time in 50 years, they were amazed. The show was addressing racism, environmental destruction, and corporate corruption, issues that are still relevant today. It felt like the writers had been trying to send a message through time. Fans started petitioning for the show to be re-evaluated. Universities began teaching it in media studies courses. The Big Valley transformed from a nostalgic piece of 1960s entertainment into something recognized as genuinely important television. But the biggest revelation came from something Lee Majors said in a recent interview. He revealed that the show's creator had originally wanted to end the series much earlier, but the cast convinced him to keep going. They didn't want it to end because they genuinely loved working together. That feud between the two male actors? According to Majors, it was exaggerated by crew gossip. They were actually competitive friends, pushing each other to be better performers. So what does all of this mean? What's the real story of The Big Valley? Here's what we've learned. The Big Valley wasn't supposed to succeed. It was thrown into a terrible time slot on a Saturday night when nobody was watching television. The network didn't believe in it. The star almost quit before it even premiered. The lead actor was so unknown that he was literally replaceable by contract. And yet, it became one of the most beloved television shows of the 1960s. Why? Because the people involved cared. Barbara Stanwyck could have phoned it in. She was already a legend. She didn't need to prove anything. But instead, she brought everything she had to every single scene. Lee Majors could have treated it like a stepping stone, just a job to get through. But instead, he showed up every day ready to learn and grow as an actor. The stunt that went wrong, the feud that wasn't really a feud, the episodes that were hidden away, all of these things were just parts of the messy, complicated reality of making television in the 1960s. But somehow, out of that chaos, something beautiful emerged. The Big Valley taught us that great storytelling doesn't come from perfect conditions or unlimited budgets. It comes from people who care deeply about the work. It comes from taking risks. It comes from trusting your instincts even when nobody else believes in you. The show was also ahead of its time in ways that most people never realized. It featured a strong female lead at a time when television was dominated by male heroes. It tackled social issues subtly but honestly. It showed family dynamics that were real and complicated, not sanitized for mass consumption. And it proved something important. That a television show shot partly on a haunted ranch, partly on a soundstage with a cast that included feuding actors and nervous executives, could still create magic.